the mysterious realm of the unknown, where many things are not as they appear to be. Tonight, the KUNX Digital Broadcasting Network takes you to the often overlapping worlds of science and unexplained phenomena, which bring us to the very edge of reality. And now, here's the man who brought UFOs to the United Nations, your host and guide into Edge of Reality Radio, Lee Speigel. Hello, everyone, and welcome tonight here on Edge of Reality Radio. Kind of caught me off guard there a little bit. You have success. I want to say this because this is what we're all here for. Lee Speigel. And Lee used to say, you have successfully crossed over the line and into Edge of Reality Radio on the unxnetwork.com. And as a producer of this show, I opened this show with him so many times, and I can hear it. I can hear it just like it was yesterday. This is the moment where he would come in with such a well-written monologue and would be able to segue right into an introduction to one of his fabulous guests. And so I'm going to try to guest host right here for the moment. There's going to be a lot of us. And, as the producer of Edge of Reality Radio, I'm filling in for the amazing colleague, the late, great Lee Speigel himself here. Tonight, we have gathered together but a handful of Lee's friends and colleagues to pay tribute to a man who was very special to so many in his lifetime. We were, if we were to assemble everyone who deserved to be here right now, we would be here this time next week to fit them all in. So for everyone that we couldn't get on tonight, we want to extend our sincerest apologies. We all know that you were very special to Lee, and there are very, very, very large. There's a very large number of you out there who deserve to be here as well as any of us, and we know that. But we want to apologize for all of you who couldn't be here. Over the last 5 decades, Lee researched and reported on a variety of the paranormal in radio and television and print media, audio recordings and audio and video interviews and lectures. Lee was on ABC, CBS, NBC, United Nations, Omni Magazine, AOL, the Huffington Post, KGRADB, the Unx Media, and right here on the X, to producing and co-producing and co-writing a critically acclaimed 2020 documentary about UFOs, The Phenomenon. And every week, Lee presented the often overlapping worlds of UFOs, science, and unexplained phenomena right here on this very show. I want to share a quote with you real quick from Lee. Quote, "We're all looking for the truth in some form or fashion. How we deal with and accept new ideas will help to shape our lives in the most productive and personally meaningful ways. Enjoy the journey with me." And now we will present to all of you watching and listening those productive and meaningful ways in which we all have enjoyed the journey with him. And what a true honor it was to know him in this life. I first want to begin tonight. We've got a lot of people here to come on and to get to. So I first want to bring on Margie Kay, the owner of Unx Media and the KUNX Digital Broadcasting Station, to share some of her thoughts about hiring Lee for his final job here at the Unx Network as the managing editor and probably a few other things. Margie, take it away.
Thank you, Race. I know for me and everyone else here, this is very difficult to do. since it's been so soon since his passing. But I wanted to say a few things. Lee was a very talented and special person who was not only very intelligent, but kind and unassuming. He had a unique style, not only with his writing, but also his sense of humor. When I heard that Lee might be looking for a job, I called him immediately, and he said yes, he was up to the challenge. Knowing of Lee's work at the Huff Post and others, I was thrilled to have him on board. As managing editor of NX Magazine, he took his job very seriously. He and I spent hours of time together with each issue, going over each comma, space, spelling error, or anything else he would find that was not exactly perfect. Lee's perfectionism always showed in the articles he wrote and edited, and while he usually took a little longer to get things done than most people, the final product was always on point. Even now, I find myself thinking I should check with Lee about an article and then realize I can't just pick up the phone and call him. But I do feel his presence daily while I'm editing or writing and often think, what would Lee do? Then tackle the issue as I think he would. I even tried using AI to generate an article once, and I felt Lee say a big no, it won't be genuine. And of course, he was right. Lee's show, Edge of Reality, was an extension of his mindset and professionalism. Each show was carefully researched and thought out, and his guests were always top-notch. He spent the time focused on what the guests had to say, even though Lee already knew the answers to most of what they were talking about. As a ufologist, writer, editor, radio show host, producer, and good friend and colleague, Lee Speigel was the best, and I miss him greatly. And that is my contribution to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margie. Thank you. Thank you. And now I want to move forward to introduce to you the intrepid Martin Willis. And Martin Willis is going to come on here. Martin,
hey,
thank you so much for all the work you've put into this show tonight, brother. And the floor is yours. You guys take it straight away.
Well, thank you. All right. Thank you, Race and Marge, both you. I first saw, I'm going to bring my good friend Alejandro in just a second. I first saw Lee Speigel from the Huffington Post when I very first started, my show way back when. And I kept bugging my good friend Alejandro, please connect me to Lee, please. And then, Lee's probably thinking, who is this guy? Why would I want to connect with him? Ends up, it was a great connection. I think we both enjoyed each other's company. A lot of, I know all these people that are waiting to come into the studio now are all going to understand when I say this. When Lee called, I knew it was going to be a 2-hour call, and I see them laughing down there, and I welcomed it. When I could do it, I welcomed it because it was always so entertaining, and he was such a gem. And so funny, and his stories, oh my God, his stories, he had such a way of telling the story, first of all, and I just loved hearing them, just crazy stuff that he did to succeed at whatever it was he was doing. And so I'm going to bring, I think first what I'd like to do, if that's all right, I'm going to play a song because this is one that he did. And the explanation will be right on the video when it comes up. But Lee was a folk singer and a very good one. And he wrote music and he played. That was his ambition. And he told me a story about getting kicked out of the Mount Washington Hotel. He was working there because he was playing his guitar. All kinds of fun stuff. But right now I'd like to play this 1974 recorded song that he did. A lovely voice and great talent. Here he goes.
The sun is a very magic fellow. He shines down on me each day. The sun is a very magic fellow. He shines down on me each day. He shines down on me each day. The sea is a very, very old man, deeper than the deepest blue. The sea is a very, very old man, deeper than the deepest blue, deeper than the deepest blue. A star is so very far away, love, just between you and me. A star is so very far away, love, just between you and me, just between you and me. A girl is a pill of all my sadness, she sings all my cares away. A girl is a pill of all my sadness, she sings all my cares away, sings all my cares away, singing all my cares away, sings all my cares away.
So I was able to talk to Lee, up until like a month and a half or so before he passed. And we weren't talking UFOs, we were talking guitars. He was trying to help me pick a guitar. And you can see in that song how talented he was. And he sent me some other songs that are absolutely beautiful. And we're going to play one of his songs, the very last thing we do tonight. But for right now, I'd like to bring in my good friend, Alejandro. Hey, Alejandro.
Hey. So it's funny because, we took some time to do this, 2 or 3 weeks since he's passed. And, that first week or so was really sad, of course. And I thought I was over getting emotional about Lee, but obviously I haven't. So I'm going to try to deal. Geez, it's hard. It's almost like it feels, when you start to talk about a friend with your friends, like he's present. And I don't know. And that kind of creates that emotion. Because, like I said, I thought I was done being emotional overly, but I probably never will be. And I think people that experience grief can understand that. But, Lee was a wonderful person. We first met because he was writing these great articles about UFOs for Huffington Post. And, that was shocking because especially at that time, there was no mainstream media person on a national outlet doing that. And not only that, he was doing great articles. He was a true, like Margie was saying, he was a professional. He was very stickler to details and accuracy. And a lot of that was a drive for credibility for this field. He's like, if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. And we got to do this as professional as anything out there. And so, I think it was wise of Margie to get him on her network and then to also have him edit her magazine. And he was extremely excited about that. So that definitely brought him joy, as along with this radio show, which he was so excited when it started because it was the same name of a radio show he did for NBC way back when. But one of the things that was fun is when we started covering his articles in Open Minds and started to get to know him. And then he brought me on with him to write at Huffington Post. But he loved the Congress, the International UFO Congress, which, of course, at OpenMinds.tv, which I work for, we ran. Of course, my lovely girlfriend and significant other, Karen Brard, runs it now. She couldn't be here. She's actually not feeling good right now, or else I was going to have her on to share stories. But he absolutely loved, one of his favorite things was to be backstage or at night, be in our special little back room and have all kinds of people there to tell stories and have fun. He wasn't really a drinker, but of course other people were, and there's all the craziness that would happen there. Ben, who you're going to hear from in a sec, and David Marler and Marc D'Antonio, who are all going to be here to talk about him. They love to do impersonations, so they'd be doing Nick Pope, and of course Nick Pope would be there. He was a drinker, and he is, and he would be having fun, so that would generate a lot of stories. But he had just so much fun hanging out with everybody, and I think that's what's fun about this show is that that's what we'll be kind of doing, is hanging out and talking about our stories about Lee. one of the things that we also did at the Congress that he was super proud of, and that I'm really proud of, is that we gave him an award for a UFO Researcher of the Year, like one of the very first years that we knew him, because he was doing such great work. And I was working with some great people, and we put together a little piece that we'll be watching in a second that highlights, his accomplishments throughout the years. So that's also really exciting. And I do want to just real quick share a couple of, let's see if I can, pictures.
These pictures you sent me, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry about that. Yeah, I was just queuing up that movie. So, all right, let me.
No problem. But I've got the movies here. I could probably grab up if you need me to. It looks like you were showing some. But I mean, the big one I wanted to share. There's one with me and Jason McClellan and Lee in Las Vegas, or in New York. That was the first time we visited him in Huffington Post. That's another person who couldn't be here, Jason McClellan of Open Minds, and I wanted to kind of just, have him as a part of this as much as we could. And then just the other pictures that are fun are, we have a couple pictures of his wedding that a lot of us were able to attend. And there we go. So that was really proud to be able to be there. And I know Lorraine, his wife, is probably watching right now, and she's gonna try to come on later. She can probably do a better job of maintaining her composure than I can. She's great. So we're really proud of him to finally get married. We have been telling him, what are you waiting for? You've got the love of your life, this wonderful person. And he finally took the plunge, and we were all really happy to be there. But I guess just that's a little bit about Lee himself. As far as his career, we'll be showing you in the Open Minds thing. But I guess the only thing that I wanted to add finally is one of his stories was his Spielberg story, which I think is a lot of fun. And he was really proud of that. He got a special, and we've got a video on Open Minds where I've got an interview where I'm interviewing him about this, because I do lectures on it, on Spielberg, and I like to include it. But he got this special copy of the Close Encounters poster, which was rare. And he loved that. It was in the background sometimes when he did interviews. It's in the video that we did. But essentially, we'll get into it, but just real quick, when Lee took it upon himself to make this UN presentation happen in the late 70s, he got Jacques Vallee and Alan Hynek involved with that. Hynek being, the lead scientist helping the Air Force investigate UFOs from 47 to 69, and Vallee, who you'll hear from shortly, another good friend of Lee's, and of course legendary researcher. He got them involved, and then they got a call from Steven Spielberg. Do you need help? And they got to go down and visit him in the office, and they took advantage of Spielberg's help. So they were able to get some video editing work done and some other work done to help them with those UN presentations. So that's just what I want to share right now. I'm glad that I was able to get something out, because even watching what we've done thus far, what I'm realizing is that it's hard, kind of like Race was talking about. I haven't come to terms that he's gone. It's really weird when you work so closely with someone and interact and have so much fun, and then they're gone and you can't call them anymore. And a lot of us never got the chance to really tell him, I feel like, how much he cares about us. So that's what we're doing here. So thank you all for being here, and let's get going to everybody else's talks.
Thank you, Alejandro. I totally get what you said. I mean, I can't believe I won't be talking on the phone with him anymore. I've said that many times. It's like, it doesn't even feel real. This was
doesn't.
I think you and I had a talk right after about that. And this is the one with Jason in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what he loved.
Yeah.
There's Maureen with Open Minds.
Yeah.
Of course, Travis Walton there. What's funny too about this is Travis is always bringing out his guitar, and everybody's always jamming. But even though Lee did this wonderful music that you've heard, and we'll hear some more, I never heard him sing. He never broke out his guitar and jammed with all the UFO jammers, which is kind of funny. But that's what's great about being able to enjoy his music now.
Yeah, just one quick thing. I just want to show you the type of guy that Lee was, something I just remembered. See this right here? That you'll see is Lee Speigel on the phone. Now, Lee took this picture from his side later on or something. On a YouTube. That's what he did. But my guest didn't show up on a show one night. And I said, oh my God, who am I going to call? So I called Lee and I said, because it's a live show, I said, Lee, help me. I need someone. He was on the train. He said, I can do it on the phone. He was with me on the train and did that show. That was, and I just had him on speakerphone and it worked.
Working in New York and living in Queens. So he was on that train a lot.
Yeah. I think now's the time we should play Jacques Vallee's. No, let's play the Researcher of the Year. Sorry about that. We'll play,
and then maybe we'll go right into Jacques after that.
That sounds like a great idea. Let me pull this up. Here it is, right here.
Cool. So we're going to kind of free will it because we've got lots of people coming in to join us.
Known to most these days for his Huffington Post articles, Lee Speigel has devoted much thought and energy to the subject of the UFO phenomenon. Years of tireless research have propelled him to the forefront of this highly debated topic. Since he was a young boy, his interest in the unexplained ranged from topics on science, UFOs and aliens, to living dinosaurs. That interest only compounded through the years and led him to pursue research and writing in the unsolved. His first foray into the pursuit and investigation of these topics was in 1975, when he produced and wrote a documentary record album called UFOs: The Credibility Factor. This marked the first time that voices from the military and scientific community came together to disclose their own personal UFO encounters. This was further push for the government to recognize the phenomenon. In 1978 came another early attempt at UFO disclosure, but this time on a world stage. Lee became the only person in history to produce a major presentation on UFOs at the United Nations. Under the sponsorship of the country Grenada, he brought together leading military and scientific experts who urged leaders to establish an international UFO study panel. This event sparked hot debate from leaders around the world. Former British Ministry of Defense UFO Chief Nick Pope confirmed that his country tried to block his UN presentation. This presentation is still looked on as a milestone in ufology. Also in 1978, Lee became one of the first media personalities to bring public awareness to the legendary 1947 Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash. Speigel coordinated efforts with nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman and produced a week-long series of radio reports for NBC Radio that featured exclusive interviews with military personnel who were directly involved with the initial Roswell cover-up. For the next 8 years, he produced, wrote, and hosted nearly 1,500 local and national programs, including NBC Radio's UFO Reports, Unexplained Phenomena, and The Edge of Reality. During the same time, Speigel was also a feature writer for Omni magazine, including several cover stories about UFOs and cryptozoology. In 1993, he produced and wrote Lincoln's Music in America, The Classics in Space. This was a national award-winning classical musical special that focused on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It was broadcast over the Concert Music Network and co-hosted by Dr. Frank Drake, founder of the SETI Institute. It now lives in the permanent collection at the Paley Center for Media in New York City. Between 2007 and 2009, while on staff at abcnews.com, Speigel wrote feature stories about Roswell, New Mexico, UFO legends, looking for life in meteorites, and the controversial practice of firewalking. Since 2010, Lee has been informing readers by writing hundreds of stories covering unexplained UFOs and related topics, with his articles posted by the Huffington Post. This past year, a section of a 2008 Air Force personnel manual, which advised pilots, radar operators, and other Air Force personnel on what to do when they encountered any unknown airborne objects, was deleted from the 2011 version just days after the Huffington Post asked Pentagon officials about the purpose of the UFO section. Lee received an unofficial apology from former Ministry of Defense UFO Chief Nick Pope for any involvement his country had in trying to stop Lee's 1978 UN presentation. Pope also admitted exclusively to Lee that he was part of a UK government policy that ridiculed UFO reports and UFO eyewitnesses.
We're looking at stills of a sequence that obviously looks like something extraordinary. If this object first showed up on the right, it was getting ready to pass behind the steeple of this cathedral in New Orleans. It obviously went behind the cathedral and then came out. I get contacted by the NBC cameraman who shot the video, because he said he saw my story about this, and everybody's claiming these are nothing but insects flying close to the camera. Other people were saying, no, it's aliens interested in the football game. He said, I couldn't keep silent. These are airplanes coming in for a landing because I shot the video.
But they don't look like airplanes because?
Because he was using a special time-lapse photography.
Lee's diligence to the truth is always evident. He has devoted his life to delving into the unexplained. The pieces he's researched and written have exposed the uniformed masses to an array of new thoughts, ideas, and ways to communicate them. This is why Lee Speigel is being named Researcher of the Year.
I'm sorry for the glitch. Everyone knows me pretty well for that, but I can't get this to drop out. So let me just. There's a lot of people in the down below in the studio, and I couldn't get to the video to pop it out. So sorry about that, everyone, for the dead air. But anyway, going to be bringing Alejandro in right now, and then I'm going to be dropping out. Alejandro is basically going to be taking over as a host from this point, but right off the bat, we're going to be playing a video that Jacques Vallee sent in tribute. Here it is.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to remember Lee and all the occasions we had of working together. I first met him on the occasion of the presentation to the United Nations that he engineered by himself, contacting the staff of different countries and so on, and finally getting that session organized. I was there, as you know, with Professor Hynek and with a number of with Stanton Friedman and a number of other participants. All that was engineered, organized, and collated and published by Lee, which was absolutely remarkable. And over the years, we remained in contact, and I participated in a number of his podcasts and met him again in New York a couple of times over the years. His loss is going to be profoundly felt in the community because there are not many people with his talent, not only to present ideas in a way that people can obtain and can react to in the different media, but also behind the scenes in coordinating and negotiating different positions. And this was absolutely remarkable. And all of us, of course, are very sad to have lost him. And so I want to present again my condolences to his wife and to his family. And we're going to be missing him in this new phase of that seems to be finally happening of recognition of the phenomenon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Jacques. They were very close up until the end. Some of you might have heard of Project Titan, the new UN effort, and they were actually kind of trying to help out that effort, which is on pause right now. I also learned something new. I think it was Margie who shared in the chat that Lee didn't play his guitar anymore because he had arthritis. But as Martin says, we've got a lot of people in the wait that want to have some tell us some words and share some stories about Lee. And I think next up we have Ben Hansen.
Hey,
Hey, buddy.
Am I?
Yeah, we can hear you
I'm
just
unmuted.
fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm kind of like you, Alejandro. My thoughts have been just kind of all over the place because it's taken a while to sink in, and hearing his voice. I guess we could start with that. I always used to tease Lee because to me he sounded like Burl Ives. Growing up watching those old Christmas, animated clay animation things, and I actually got him to sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer once to me, and it sounded just the same. And I was gonna dub it up for you, but you can go check that out and listen. He had a very deep, gravelly voice as he got older. I think I first met him through the UFO Congress, and Alejandro was emceeing the event. I was trying to remember, and it's kind of fuzzy to me the first time that we actually met, but I'm sure I was introduced. Maybe you brought him up to my booth there, and pretty soon he invited me to start doing commentary for the Huffington Post. So the way that it would normally work is he would call me up when he'd have a story, and then he would call up Marc D'Antonio, who's also going to speak. So Marc joined in a little bit later, but he would use us kind of as opposing opinions. I don't remember one time, and I egg Marc for this, that he would ever not have an explanation for something. And I was kind of down the middle. So he would call me up and say, so have a new story. The thing about Lee's phone calls. Okay, I'm married now, but before I was married, because I met him back in it was probably 2013 or so. Love Lee to death, but he is a talker, and everybody knows this. He gets on the phone and he would just go on and on and on. And when I was single, it wasn't so bad, but once I was engaged and then married, my wife Kelly loves Lee as well, but I would come home and have the phone in my hand, and she'd look at me and she'd go, "Is it Lee?" It's like, "Yes, honey." He has a lot of times, and before he dated Lorraine for a very long time, I believe, but he didn't live very close to her, and so he would call me on the subway. He would call me when he got home, and I really miss those talks now, because when he did marry Lorraine. And Lorraine probably knows this, those talks pretty much ended. He stopped talking to us and was with the love of his life. The talks would range from anything from, of course, the UFO topics, but also about his kidney stones. And he would tell me about the excruciating pains that he was having on the subways, going home. And then he would invite me to do things. So I just have a couple. I know we don't have much time for everyone here. A couple quick little stories. He was in Vegas, so we were talking at an event. I think it was for the National Atomic Museum, and I don't know if it was the same trip or another, but it doesn't matter. Criss Angel, the magician, had reached out to him, and they soon became kind of buddies back and forth. And Criss said, "Hey, if you're in town, I'll invite you to my magic show, and you can come." He was playing at the, I think it was the Luxor, and you can bring some friends. And he called me up, and he was so excited. He's like, "This is Criss Angel, and can't wait. Would you like to come and be my guest?" And I think we have a picture of that somewhere. At any rate, I said, "Sure," but I said, Lee, is he just doing this to be a good friend, or like, do you think there's going to be a favor exchange? He's like, "No, I don't think so. He just really likes the work that I do and everything." I said, "Okay, great." We met Criss backstage. He was just in heaven. He was really into magic. he would tell me stories about, I think it was Kreskin, the great Kreskin, and Uri Geller, or things like that. And anyways, sure enough, a couple weeks later, and the rare chance that Chris is listening to this, it's not your fault, Chris, but he's like, well, I got a phone call or a text or email, whatever it was, from Chris, and he would like a review on his latest magic show to put it up in some billboard or something. And he was so nervous. He was so nervous because Lee had the greatest integrity, and he was worried that being an editor, that he couldn't endorse any show or any product, right? Because being a journalist, he had to maintain his objectivity. And so he was asking me how he should word it, what he should say, what he should tell Chris. It all worked out fine. But the different things that he would do, he was a man. I have some notes here. Just incredible integrity, very precise. He was a perfectionist. He kept a lot of things to himself. We actually didn't know that he was this sick, until a couple months before he passed. And I also think that he was one of the greatest people to teach me about what I call the thread of life. And there are certain subjects or themes or interests that you have where you kind of put those away or try to put them away, but they always find their way back. And UFOs was one of those things for me. It has been. And I put it away for a couple of years, and before you know it, it works its way back into your life somehow. And if he could only be around now, to see, I think, what's rolling out in the next months and years, he would be so happy. He had so many passions. He's a very passionate person. Loved taking pictures of the moon. I think everyone who's here, who was on that thread, or in those special groups, he wanted a special insider group. Well, he made a thread of emails, and every time there was a super moon, a super blue moon or something, he'd go out and took these amazing photos and flood our inbox with moons, right? He had such a sense of humor as well. It was like a dry sense of humor. One of the things, I don't know if he did this to you, James, or to Alejandro, but he wasn't big using his cell phone, really didn't know how to use it much. But when he got one, and his office phone, if we wouldn't answer the phone, because he knew that I had a small, narrow, window of time that I could talk to him before I went home, he would flood my voicemail, or he would leave these ridiculously long voicemails, and it was our little running joke. So I'd call him back, and his voicemail would say, "I can't come to the phone right now, so please leave me a message." And so I'd leave him a message, and I say, "Oh, so is it that you can't come to the phone? Like you're not able to, or you don't want to? Because there's a difference there. So if your foot is broken and you can't get to the phone," and I just go on and on and on. And then if it would go right to message, I'd call him back, and I'd leave another one and another one and another one. And I would fill his voicemail up, and he would do that to me too. And it was just the funniest thing, because these little inside jokes, you really know that you have a true friend. I guess I just wanted to say in closing, on some of those phone calls, he would do it mainly in jest, but he would say, "I love you," but he'd say it in a way like, "I love you, dear. I love you, honey," like you'd say to your girlfriend. And it's a kind of a guy's way of, making a joke of it, but letting the person know that you really do love them. And that's important. And it's important, to say it not just to your significant other, but to say it to your friends. And I really appreciate that about Lee. I'm going to step out. I mean, I know that we're going to maybe have an open forum later. I want to give time to others, but I do want to say that this is not the last time we're going to see our friend. I firmly believe that. He's taking a journey right now, and he's out there just like the songs that he wrote, but it's eternal. There's something after this. And maybe he knows the secrets now. Maybe he knows what we've been searching for. and maybe it'll be revealed later. But I do think I look forward and believe that there will be that reunion when we finally get to see him again. And of everything, I think he believed that there's something more to this life. There's something more out there, and there's something more to this, and we're going to miss him.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, there's a couple things, him not being afraid to tell his friends, men friends, that they love him. A lot of younger guys are more not afraid to do that. And I think that's really cool because we need to tell each other that before we don't have a chance to. The other thing, just one quick story that's really funny. Speaking of Ben and, I get to hang out. We're both Southern California here. And he got a call a few years ago when we were eating ice cream, and his wife Kelly gave him like this stare, like, you better not answer that phone call. And my significant other Karen started laughing because she's like, is that Lee? And she's like, yes, he talks to Lee forever. And it's funny because Karen was laughing because she gave me that look, like, you better not start talking to Lee for the rest of the night for 3 hours. So I'm sure others will be able to identify with that, including the next person. I believe David Marler, I think, is waiting and would like to also come and say a few words. Hello, David.
Hello. It's great to be here with all of you. It's truly an honor, to pay tribute to our friend Lee. And Alejandro, I want to thank you for setting the benchmark for the waterworks, because you got me crying. I thought I was fine as well. And then I started hearing all these memories and thoughts of Lee.
I know.
Literally sitting in this very chair in front of this very camera, doing so many shows with him over the years. It's surreal, is the only word I keep coming back to. It's surreal that he's not here with us right now. But I had an order of topics and talking points I wanted to quickly address, because I do want to be brief to respect everyone else that's on the call. But yes, my wife would also give me that look. Kendra would be like, is that Lee? So this is a systemic problem that we dealt with. And I say that obviously jokingly. We absolutely love Lee and the dialogue with Lee. I always like to say, for those that are watching this, that have watched Lee and I on the show over the years, there's a 1 to 10 ratio. For every 1 hour you saw us talking on the show, there were 10 hours of private conversations taking place earlier that week. It was a regular cadence of calls with Lee. And I respected the years that he was involved in the subject, his knowledge, and something that you often don't hear today, but his wisdom, because I think with knowledge and experience comes wisdom. And I used to use him as a sounding board, and not having that anymore is going to be very hard. Just briefly, like I said, I jotted down some notes just in the interest of time. I don't want to digress too far. I think much like Ben, it was 2013, 2014 at the UFO Congress where I first met physically Lee. I certainly knew about his work writing for the Huffington Post. And I do believe, if memory serves correctly, he originally reached out to me versus myself reaching out to him. In 2013, my book was published. And in that, talking about triangular UFOs, I dedicated a whole section to this April 1975 series of sightings. And Lee was the principal investigator in those sightings. And in many, many subsequent conversations over the years, he would always reference the fact, I love that you captured the essence of what took place back in 1975 in North Carolina. And I think he said it as a matter of historical record, making sure that the historical record's preserved. But on a personal level, and he never articulated this overtly, I think he appreciated that decades later, someone recognized that he did all of this investigative work. For those that only knew him post Huffington Post era, I don't think people realized he was boots in the field. And in many lectures, he used to state that I went down to Lumberton, North Carolina in April of 1975 at the direct request of Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And Hynek, asked him to go down there, and Lee's recounted this a number of times on shows, but for those that haven't heard it, he said, well, great. He goes, I'm finally going to see a flying saucer. And Hynek quickly corrected him. He goes, no, Lee, you don't understand. These officers are describing triangular UFOs. And Lee would jokingly say many, many times over the years, so you're sending me down to look for a flying Dorito? And he said, I wanted to see a classic flying saucer. And Hynek took it seriously. He responded, well, if you don't want to go, Lee, I can try to find someone else. And Lee was very respectful and stated, no, you're Dr. J. Allen Hynek. If you want me to go, I'm going. And he went down there. And as the artist illustration there that you see by Dale Hendrickson, which captured this event very well, he went out with the police officers who just the night before had seen a triangular UFO. And the centerpiece of that artwork there, you see Lee standing next to this beam of light. He actually witnessed the UFO that they had seen previously the night before. And so I always like to say Lee was a rare gem in the sense that he was an investigator who became an experiencer, which doesn't always happen. But I think he always appreciated the fact that I covered the Lumberton, North Carolina UFO flap, where there were 6 days of these objects being sighted. And he even mentioned that he didn't realize until he read my book that that was the first documented historical flap of triangular UFOs. Up to that point, it had just been random sightings by various individuals across the country. And I think that really just made him feel even more proud about the work that he did back in 1975. And it was so funny. In 2016, I'd met him in 2014. In 2016, I met him in Roswell, and I had the opportunity to, for the first time, introduce what would be my future wife, Kendra, to him in Roswell. We met at Applebee's that night, and many of the people on this call, we've had many drinks at Applebee's in Roswell over the various years during conferences. And it was so funny. It was a running joke. He said, yeah, Dave Marler is not only a UFO researcher, he's my UFO stalker. And the reason he says that is, and I love the fact that this was brought up in the video, he always loved the fact that I had an original copy of UFOs, The Credibility Factor, and I hang it here in the research room. And over here, I have the pass from the event in Roswell. And then you can see over here, he wrote, Dave, to the best ever investigator of triangles, so glad to call you friend, Lee Speigel. And I had to chase him around all weekend because he kept getting intercepted by media and by other people wanting to talk to him. And that became a running joke with us that I was his official stalker. But fast forwarding in time, in 2019, he had the opportunity to come here and see the historical archives with his wonderful wife, Lorraine. And we had an opportunity to kind of go through some of the history. And he was like a kid in a candy store being surrounded by all of this material. And he just absolutely loved it. And ironically, the year before that, in 2018, Alejandro, Marc D'Antonio, myself, and forgive me if I'm forgetting somebody, Race Hobbs was also at this event. We were in Hewlett, Wyoming. And I have to say, the people of Wyoming are so genuine, down to earth, and just warm and welcoming. We all felt like we were surrounded by family. And Lee was dealing with back issues at that time. And I took the liberty of being able to, assist Lee during this very difficult period for him. And he was very embarrassed by it, but we kind of made light of it and joked about it. And going to Hewlett, Wyoming and coming back, we connected through Denver Airport. And I had the honor, and I say that truly, I had the honor of pushing him around Denver Airport, going and coming to that conference. And a number of times he was apologizing and say, I really appreciate this. And, to paraphrase the phrase from Boys Town of America, I told him, I said, I looked him right in the eye and I said, Lee, you're not heavy. You're my brother. And I meant that sincerely. He felt like a brother to me. The hours we spent on the phone, he taught me so much with regard to the UFO subject. He connected me with many of the people that are on this call. I was thinking, how would you describe Lee earlier today as we were getting prepared for this? And there were two things that came to mind. One, he's like an onion. He has multiple layers. Folk singer, organizer of the United Nations event, radio personality, journalist with the Huffington Post, radio host, internet radio host, UFO researcher. He had so many layers. And despite the complexity as far as all the facets to his life, at the core, there was a very simple person who truly had old world values. He was truthful. He was honest. He had integrity. he treated, as Ben alluded to, he treated his friends with love, and he was not afraid to express that. And I just will miss those late night conversations with him. And I love the guy. And obviously his work with the 1978 United Nations event. And then one of the things that we haven't touched on too much, there was so much passion in the work that he and I and James Fox collaborated on in making the phenomenon. And so many calls between Lee, myself, James, and Lee, contributing historical material from the archives here for the documentary. Lee, I would argue, and Lorraine can correct me if I'm wrong, his wife, the United Nations, I think, was the gem that he always thought that was like the pinnacle of his contribution to the UFO field. But second to that, I would argue, I think he really enjoyed being part of the phenomenon, the documentary, The Phenomenon by James Fox. And James will, I'm sure, touch on that as well. But I think that's everything I wanted to cover. I just wanted to say that we're all a very small field in this UFO research community. And I know many of my fellow presenters here, we're all very dear friends and colleagues, and we respect each other. We love each other. And I say it on behalf of myself, and I know I say it on behalf of the others here. Lee was our brother. He wasn't just a friend. And it's going to be difficult moving forward. Lastly, the one thing I wanted to mention today, or actually two things, going through the historic files here, I pulled out his original typewritten report on the Lumberton, North Carolina event. And this states, Lumberton, North Carolina, April 3rd, April 9th, 1975, E. Lee Speigel. Report completed May 4th, 1975, submitted to Dr. J. Allen Hynek on May 8th, 1975. And this is literally the original typewritten manuscript. And I look back and I think about a much younger Lee Speigel hovering over a typewriter, pecking at the keys, creating that report. And so I wanted to say that. And one thing lastly, and then I'll cede to my other friends. Lee knew so much about the UFO field. It's very rare that you can share something with him that he didn't know. But when I was going through the NICAP files, I said, Lee, you always talked about coming from New Hampshire. You always talked about New Hampshire when you were growing up. I said, I came across a NICAP UFO report from a Larry Speigel from Concord, New Hampshire, that was filed in 1965. And it was a sighting report from December 57. I said, do you know who this is? And he goes, yeah, it's my brother. He goes, I knew he had a UFO sighting. I never knew he documented it in a NICAP form. And that's the original NICAP form right there by Larry Speigel. Wow. And I love that because I finally was able to share something with him that he didn't know about the UFO research field. And I'll always remember that. And subsequent to that, we actually got his brother on the phone and I had a chance to talk to him. And so that's the one takeaway that, okay, I could share something with Lee regarding UFOs that he didn't know. And so with that, I'm gonna cede to my friends and my colleagues, my family that's on the call. And Lee, we love you, and I can't wait to hear the other presenters and the memories that they're going to present.
All right. Thank you, Dave. It's funny because you mentioned there's just some things and moments that are just so special that, they really get you. And those Applebee's and Roswell moments were definitely some of those. I actually have that poster that he showed right here done by Dale Hendrickson of Lee's sighting. In fact, I have a lot of Dale's artwork, and I don't think Dale knows I have all this up on my page, but Dale's going to be here to talk to us in a minute as well. But next, I think we're going to play a video from someone who couldn't be here live. We've got several people.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Marden. I wish I could be with you this evening to speak about my friend and colleague, Lee Speigel, whom I greatly admired, but I had a prior commitment that I could not change. So I met Lee finally after my Aunt Betty Hill had spoken very lovingly about him as a man from New Hampshire, a journalist whom she greatly admired. In fact, whenever she spoke about him, I told Lee in a recent conversation, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, that she would clasp her hands under her chin and speak of him as Lee Speigel. She always, through that tone of voice, told me how much she appreciated and admired a person. So I did finally meet Lee and saw him many times at conferences where we were both speaking. Also, we had telephone conversations occasionally. And at the last time that we conversed, which was a few months ago, Lee sent me a photograph of Jacques Vallee and Betty and Barney near my home, my childhood home in Kingston, New Hampshire. And it was at Country Pond. And I actually was there. I was 18, nearly 19 years old at the time. And it was a thrill to meet Jacques and his wife, Janine. And I followed their work, or Jacques' work, over the years. Was very pleased to meet him and admired his work, as did Lee. There was also a connection that we had because my Aunt Betty had been contacted, she told me, by Sir Eric Gairy from the island of Grenada. He had been Prime Minister in 1977 when he contacted Lee Speigel, and Lee had helped him with a proposal for a resolution at the United Nations. And this was to launch a worldwide effort through the United Nations to study UFOs. And so Lee assisted him with this and set up a meeting with Jacques Vallee, with Dr. Alan Hynek, and with astronaut Gordon Cooper. And so Lee was very, very pleased with this. The resolution ended up being passed by the UN, but when Sir Gairy was to meet with the Secretary General of the UN in March of the following year, which it would have been 1979, he was deposed. And so this brought an end to Sir Gary's influence. But Lee was very proud of the work that he had done there too. I knew Lee as a very kind, genuine individual with many interests, who I considered to be a strong voice in the UFO research and investigation field. I liked him very much as a person, and I knew that he liked me as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. And who's always, a happy, great face at those conferences. It's always wonderful to see her. And of course, we lost Sam Friedman fairly recently, who is her partner, which is also sad. And I was joking the other day when we were putting together, all of us guys putting this together, we're kind of the old guys now that a lot of our mentors are going away. But also want to say welcome to Lee's brother, Jim, who's in the chat and watching. Your brother was obviously very important to us, and our condolences. Speaking of some of the good buddies that you heard about, including one of them that was at Devil's Tower, and I know we've got some pictures somewhere on Devil's Tower. Maybe Martin can find and pop those up as we talk, but because Lee was really excited to have the opportunity to get out there. But Marc D'Antonio, I think, is out there. There he is.
Hey, this is hard. It's very poignant for me to be here now. I'm actually out at the observatory in Arizona that Lee actually loves so much. And the photos in our gallery here are just all pictures that he loved. In fact, that image right there, you see right there, he used that image many times. He loved that particular shot that we took. And so being out here to talk about Lee is actually very fitting. And like the others, whenever a call would come in from Lee, I would hear, "I'll just keep dinner warm." because he would usually call around 6 p.m. and maybe an hour and a half later, I'd wander up to a cold dinner and I wouldn't care because it was Lee, you know. And we've been to Roswell together a number of times, of course, many different. There, that's that photo right there. I was going to talk about that very photo. What are the chances that you would end up with an airplane seat right next to one of your favorite people? Well, of course, I got a window seat, and Lee always tells the story how my face was glued to the window and I didn't even talk to him, yet I certainly did. He was exaggerating because I was just looking outside, because I'm always observant and I'm always trying to look for stuff out the windows, because, that's where we can go to see things, up in the sky. So, and we would laugh about that. And that was one of our Roswell trips. Of course, we did Devil's Tower together. As well, and Devil's Tower was a great deal of fun. Bob Olson and Lori Tucker put that together to make it all work, and they brought in people that they thought would be big impactors in the UFO community. So David was there, Alejandro, you were there, I was there, Lee was there. And there's a beautiful picture of Lee with his outstretched hands in front of Devil's Tower. And I believe in that photo he was saying, "I made it. I'm here." Well, he's never left. He's been in our memories long before he passed. And always in our thoughts. And Ben mentioned Huffington Post, and I do remember as an astronomer, he asked me to, and as MUFON's photo and video analyst guy, he asked me to look at photos. And I said, okay, sure. And that started several years of doing stories with HuffPost and him and Ben. And, that was a lot of fun too, because Lee was open to our interpretations. He had his own thoughts. Okay. And it was fun getting to talk to him at his wedding when we were there. Alejandro, I think you were there as well. I don't remember who else was there. But then we also, I would spend a lot of time, he would call me on a Monday saying, "Mr. D'Antonio, would you be available to come on Edge of Reality this Thursday?" I went, "Yeah, of course." And of course, I would go on the show, and I was on his show many times. And it was always a great deal of fun. And he always had the most incredible intellectual discussions about natural phenomena such as this stuff behind me. And so it was really enjoyable intellectually to be on that show, and it showed. It just showed. His exuberance was incredible. So yes, we miss him. But I'm going to share something with you. Some years ago, I did have a near-death experience, and I realized that this existence is transitory and that we do go elsewhere to another place. There is another reality, something which is really hard to put into words and talk about. So I do know that he has simply gone to another edge of his reality. And I'm not sure where that is. None of us are. But we can rest assured that he's going to do the same types of miraculous things there that he did here. And thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mark. We had a scare with Mark not long ago where Mark almost, had some health issues. And so Mark knows best about the other side because he's had his own kind of near-death experience, essentially. So we're really happy to have Mark with us still. And Martin also had some health issues and gave us a scare not too long ago. But we've got more friends to talk to. Next is going to be James Fox, everybody's favorite UFO documentarian, and then we'll take a break after that. But there he is out there, I'm sure, shooting some amazing footage and getting some incredible interviews.
Well, we're working on it, and I loved being on the road with Lee. We spent a lot of time on the road together, and one of our kind of secret little guilty pleasures was we would see a Panda Express, very much like I'm on the lookout for now, and we'd say, "Hey, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And he's like, oh yeah, let's go do some panda. We like off the freeway. Yeah, we go get Panda Express together, and I don't say this about that many people, but he was one of the most pure and honest and loving friends. I fell in love with him the moment we met. And I said, one day we're going to work together. One day we're going to work together, you know, and I kept saying it. And the fact that we had the opportunity to work on the phenomenon together, the phenomenon is so much better because of Lee. Lee introduced me to Jacques. Jacques became involved. Lee found the B-25 bomber that we rented to create the opening scene. Lee got all this amazing material together, and I'm going to show you my sister Kelly for a second, because this was probably the third best moment in Lee's career, was with Kelly. You can say hi, Kelly. That's my sister Kelly. She was the person looking for all the archive material, and I really wanted to dig up never before seen archive material, and Kelly spent years really looking high and low, searching, and she came upon this one bit of footage that was marked like a conference, UFO conference, 1978. She said, is this of any interest to you? And I said, well, I took a look at it, and I opened it up, and my jaw hit the floor. It was the 1978 United Nations conference that Lee had put on, and it was filmed footage of the entire event. I'm not sure if I broke that to Lee or if Kelly did, but it was like, you know, are you sitting down? Lee, you're not going to believe this. After 45 years. So it was such a beautiful moment to be able to share that with Lee, that after all this time, you know, Kelly found the United Nations footage, and so there was a whole process of getting that released, and but I want to share which I think is a really funny moment, when Lee came out to live with me for a month or two, working on the phenomenon, sitting in the edit room. He was leaving New York City, and I said, Lee, you know, make sure you bring some hiking shoes. I live in the country. It's a little, you know, a little more rugged out here. And I said, you know, we're not, unfortunately, the edit room I've got is it's not the nicest, most luxurious place. And in actuality, it was a shack at the end of a dirt road with an extension cord running out for electricity, no running water, and no toilet. And he kept saying, well, what do you mean there's no toilet? And I said, sorry, Kelly had to slam the brakes on. I said, well, you know, everyone's got their own tree. And if it's an absolute emergency, there's a house about a block down through the gardens, but then there are these attack dogs. And Lee said to me one time, I really need to go use the facilities. I said, okay, good luck. You got to go through you got to go down the garden path, through the two gates, and then you'll get to the house and come around, and, you know. And I hear this, I don't know, I guess it was like maybe 45 seconds after he left, I hear this, row, 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 row. It sounded like somebody getting attacked by a guard dog. Lee fighting for his life with these big dogs chasing him. And he comes back, he says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I have to have a place where I can go to the bathroom. And Lee and I joked about that for the longest time. And I just loved the man. I really did. He was pure and beautiful and such a pleasure to be around. And everyone I introduced him to, everyone's like, God, that guy is such a sweet, loving person. And I thank Lee for all the introductions he's made, his contribution to the phenomenon, not just the film The Phenomenon, but the phenomenon in general. He was a pioneer. He was a true pioneer.
He was, and I could say on behalf of his friends, we all got to hear in abundance about the shack, and it's lacking of facilities. I'm trying to go to the bathroom. I can't even go to the bathroom. I got to tell James to get me a bathroom. It was really funny, but he loved doing the movie.
I actually heard the dog attack, okay? Because I heard it.
That's crazy.
I was like,
That's
oh,
so
God,
funny.
this doesn't sound good. It was like, row, 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 row.
You do such a good dog impression.
Oh, my gosh. Is everything okay?
Yeah, we need gas.
Oh, my gosh. All right, we're running out of gas here in the desert. We're
okay.
But I'm gonna stop at Panda when I get to El Paso, and I'm gonna have a bowl of Chinese food and think of Lee, because I love him. I will miss him. He'll be in my thoughts. He's alive in all of us.
Right. Exactly. And I could also attest, it was definitely one of the thrills of his life when Kelly found those videos. He was so excited about that. And they're such a treasure. I hope that the rest of the world gets to enjoy them at some point.
I sent him the originals, and at some point, I'm going to make sure David Marler has all the archive material we have. David and I will be in touch about that. But I want to thank each and every one of you for putting this on, and the respect and love for our mutual friend is it's to the moon and back.
Thank you so much for joining us on the road there. And the video turned out great. So we're going to pass this back to Race for a minute. He's got a couple things to share with you. Here he comes.
Race, put your sound on, Betty.
I'm trying to gather that story that James just told was, I can't tell you how many times Lee told me that story. And when I still think about it, when he was telling it, I was over here in stitches. Like that was, Lee Speigel not having a bathroom. The laughs are boundless. They're endless, just for every word spoken after that. But before we go into break here, I want to remind everybody that many of Lee's friends have started a GoFundMe to send Lee's cremated ashes to space. A lot of you know, a lot of you don't know. The remainder of those funds, past what we'll raise, after to send his ashes to space, will be spent securing his vast 40 plus years of archives. With your help, Lee Speigel's life work will find a new home at the National UFO Historical Records Center, founded by the awesome David Marler in New Mexico in Rio Rancho. So the easiest way to donate to the GoFundMe is to go to unxnetwork.com. UNX Network, that's UNXnetwork.com, and click on the Lee Speigel GoFundMe banner right there on the main page. You can't miss it. It's right there on the front of the main page of the UNX website. So unxnetwork.com, UNXnetwork.com. And from all of us, to all of you who have already donated, and to all of you who will donate, thank you so much, so much for your amazing support. And you're listening to and watching the final Edge of Reality Radio right here on the UNX Network. We will be right back with more of Lee's wonderful friends right after these messages. It's almost here, ladies and gentlemen. The UNX Network Year 2 anniversary at XCon 2023. XCon is being held this year from October the 30th to November 1st at the beautiful Oasis Hotel and Conference Center in Springfield, Missouri. Top speakers include host of America Unearthed, Scott Walter, plus Haley Ramsey, Sev Tok, UNX's very own Maureen Richmond and Dan Terry, Mindy Toutfest, Harriet McFeely, Forrest Crawford, and many more. And they're all coming to deliver new information on topics like UFOs, alien encounters, cryptids and ancient secrets, and real hauntings from the afterlife. Join us for the film premiere of A Haunting in Blue Hill. And don't miss the Mad Hatter Paranormal Halloween Bash, Banquet, and Costume Contest on All Hallows Eve, October 31st. So join us as we close out the 2023 conference season. Info and tickets are available now at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com, and we'll see you there. Welcome back, everyone, to Edge of Reality Radio, the final edition that is absolutely filled to the top with Lee Speigel's closest friends and family. And I have been crying and laughing all night long. But before I bring Alejandro Rojas back in, I just wanted to remind everybody that most of you probably don't have any idea that I had anything to do with bringing Lee Speigel back to do Edge of Reality Radio after over 4 decades. And that's just the way we ought to keep it. But I want you all to know that every edition of Edge of Reality Radio, it's going to be, it's being remastered as we speak in a 2-part collection. It's going to be available for download in MP3 format for all of you for absolutely free. It's going to be provided to you. Lorraine, Lee's lovely wife, has already given us approval to make sure that his wonderful works are available to all of his fans and friends at a premium 0 rate. And that's exactly how we want it to be. His work should be free to you for research and for archival purposes. So be listening to UNX Network for more of that coming real soon in the future. Once we get closer to the time that all of that will be ready for you, we'll let you know. So I want to bring back Alejandro Rojas, and I want to thank you, Rojas, for all of the hard work again, right here in the middle of the show. But I want to thank you and Martin. You have done a great job with these videos and arranging all of this. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for also hosting this and for making his archives available for free, because that's some really great stuff. So I highly encourage people to go watch every episode if you haven't yet. All right. So we have a couple more videos also. So
I'm Whitley Strieber, and I considered Lee Speigel a friend, a brother in a battle, and a very, very good, effective man. I must have met Lee sometime in the 1980s after I had published Communion. I don't remember the precise meeting, but I remember him telling me that he had been responsible for creating in 1978 this presentation before the United Nations that involved J. Allen Hynek, Jacques Vallee, and others, and was the first really serious attempt to legitimize UFO investigation. A remarkable job. I later on, looking back, got a hold of the Omni magazine story he had done and talked to him about what had happened in his own life. It was just fascinating. He was a really wonderful, incredibly interesting man. He had a real presence, and I interviewed him on my show Dreamland at least once or twice over the many, many years that show has been going. And thinking back on the personal level, he told me a fascinating story about Doug Henning. I guess this must have been at Henning's birthday in the year 2000. He had come back from Switzerland where he'd been learning to levitate, I guess for his magic act. And he told Lee, he caught Lee in a hallway at his house where it was taking place, and said, "Lee, I've got a secret. I can levitate." And Lee said, of course, being Lee, okay. And Lee reported to me that he simply went up in the air, right in that hallway with no equipment, no wires, anything, and stood there for a moment and then dropped back down. And he said, it's going to be the greatest magic show in history. The next February, he was dead. I thought that was the most remarkable story, and Lee was full of remarkable stories. He was also full of respect. He was full of love. A good man has left us for the other side. Darn it, Lee, come on back. You're a magician yourself. If anyone could do it, you could do it. I love you, Lee. I miss you. I miss your voice. Miss your intelligence. Miss the natural goodness of your nature. Goodbye, my friend.
That was a great video from Whitley. And Ben just remembered part of that story. So that story about the magician levitating, Lee loved that story. He told it a lot. He really felt he witnessed somebody levitate. And Ben was just noting in the chat, he remembered that magician actually walked Lee out, I think over somewhere private, but I was saying by the elevator, and gave him this little private demonstration of this alleged, that's a word that he would use also. We use that word a lot in media, alleged levitation. Speaking of the media and the Applebee's in Roswell, we have a Roswell resident with us, and someone who works for the famous Roswell Daily Record and who has brought Lee out to Roswell. He's been the one who has gotten us out there to have those special Applebee moments. Welcome, Toby.
Hi, how are you, Alejandro?
Doing good. So glad you could join us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys inviting me, and thank you to everybody for putting this together. I will say to follow James Fox's story about the shed, Lee did kind of get his revenge because I was trying to get a hold of James Fox, and Lee told me that story right before he gave me his cell phone number. So yeah, the first year I met Lee was actually, you were here, it was in 2016. The day I got married was the night before the first conference we held in Roswell for the newspaper. So my wife and I actually spent our wedding night hanging out with John Alexander, Lee, Nick Pope, Alejandro. So that was really special. And I always stayed in touch with Lee. I was just looking at my phone, the last text message you sent me. So I was sad. Yeah, Lee was such a great guy. He taught me a lot. He gave me a lot of guidance. It more than anything, if I needed someone to turn to and I valued their opinion, it was Lee, because at the end of it, he would always give me a pep talk. So that was kind of cool, especially after my father passed away. I turned to him even more because I just valued his life experience, and he was such a nice guy. He really was. We had been communicating in the months leading up to his passing, and there were some things we wanted to work on together that unfortunately aren't going to happen, but I was very glad to hear that his archives are going to be donated to David Marler's project. I think the work that he's done, that he did in his lifetime, was simply amazing. And being the only person to present to the UN on UFOs, which are now UAPs. I mean, just achievements like that. It's amazing. I constantly had people asking me, "Hey, when you talk to Lee, can you ask him if he's going to re-release his album, or is there going to be a sequel to it?" So every time I would talk to him, I would bring that up. Yeah.
All right.
The moon pictures, though, I just when I was looking through to find photos for this, I came across a couple of emails just filled with moon pictures. So when you guys discussed that, it kind of made me laugh.
He wasn't a big texter. I think most texts I got were his moon pictures, and it was so incredible, and the timing was amazing that just a few days after he passed, there was a super blue moon, which is extremely rare and the exact type of thing that he just was so crazy about. He loved the supermoons. He just was really into those and taking his own pictures.
Kind of gives me the chills because when I was looking through the pictures of that first event we did, he was actually in one of them standing right here holding a plate of food. I don't know if you remember the potluck we had that first night.
Uh-huh.
He was just in here telling everybody stories. He had everybody so captivated. He just, I don't know. And yeah, I missed those long phone calls too. And they would go for quite a while, but I always got something of value out of them, definitely. Whether it was wisdom or just kindness from him. He truly was a great soul, and he will be missed.
Well, thanks for providing that space for us all to get together, because I know he loved it. He loved it a lot, and he was very appreciative of your work out there.
Yeah, it was a really special time, and it's something I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. So from Roswell, thank you, Toby. So next we have the artist of which I spoke about earlier, who's a lot of his artwork is on my wall here. Look, I got your artwork up on the wall. This is even my podcast spot. So every interview I do, I've got your pictures up here. So Dale, yeah, go ahead.
Hey. Well, it's so I'm so grateful for everybody to put this on, and I think I too feel like so many. Let me get this frog out of my throat. But yeah, Lee was always kind of like your favorite uncle. I mean, whenever we'd arrive at the conventions, and I can't even remember when I first met Lee, but this is a Lee. I work on my day job as a cartoon person drawing for The Simpsons. I had to Simpsonize Lee. It just was a natural, Lee fit right in, and he was one of the favorite things he always wanted from me. And all I asked from him was just more of those amazing Lee stories, and he never disappointed. But yeah, I can't remember how long we knew him, but it was like from back in 2012 or 11, or I mean, we were going to the UFO conferences for quite a while. I don't know, maybe you remember, Alejandro, but we met Lee way back when, and when he started telling me the story about Robeson County, the Humberton sightings, I expressed to him my interest to want to illustrate some of these stories that were so powerful but seem to be lacking in coverage. And this is this is 2015, I think, and one of the greatest nights ever that you mentioned before, Alejandro. This is the backstage with, I mean, look at these luminaries. I mean, you have Nick Pope and Lee and James at the end there, and Travis Walton and Jason and everybody. I mean, it was just what a glorious night. That was just so hilarious. And those were some fantastic nights with Lee. But whenever we'd see Lee, he would just kind of light up. Like my wife and I, we'd hook up, and he'd take us off to a corner somewhere. We'd go to the hotel bar or something and have some drinks, and he would go on with some more stories. And I just wish to God, I wish I had a tape recorder with me, because there's probably stories that Lee was telling that I still don't think anybody knows about. I don't know. He was just an encyclopedia of fascinating information. But we talked for so much, going over his specific sighting and the work for that painting. and sending me sketches from some of the original that the police officers have drawn, and the news clippings, and the final images that I worked out were really just Lee and I on the phone, as Lee really kind of went more into detail as to what he really remembered looking up at this thing, because it literally came over and shined this beam down at his feet. And I can't imagine what that must have felt like. But I think my biggest question was, didn't anybody have cameras back then? Why didn't anybody get some shots of I mean, even from the police to everybody. I mean, they had good cameras back in '75. What was up with that? And nobody seemed to have an answer. But I can imagine that you're just so stunned by what you're looking at. Who's going to think to bring up cameras and things? But so my goal is to, to try to put some imagery to these stories where we don't have cameras and images, and help flesh it out, kind of be the sketch artist for the police department, as it were, of the like a crime photo or something, or the UFO photo. What was it really? And that's the kind of work I enjoy doing on my own, along with kind of science fiction and fantasy art. But yeah, it was such an honor to be able to do this painting for Lee. And I'm so grateful that I actually sent it to him to keep, because it was collecting dust literally in my own storage area, because I don't have any room in my house to keep paintings, unfortunately. And so I thought, who better? It should be with Lee. He should have it. It was his story. And so I sent it to him a few years back, and I'm so glad I did. And now I'm glad that it's within his family and Lorraine, and and just so grateful to have known him and been able to work on this with him. So I think that's he also was important in kind of really connecting me up with James too. I was fortunate to be able to do some visual effects work on the phenomenon, thanks to Lee hooking us up there. And again, just nothing but feeling grateful for these opportunities to lend my art to such amazing projects. So we will miss you, Lee, but I know we will see you again as well. I believe that too.
Well, thank you so much. I know the painting meant a lot. I mean, obviously I like it. And it was an incredible sighting. I mean,
yeah,
police chasing this thing around for over a couple counties for a few days.
I mean, it was a Spielberg moment, right from Close Encounters. I mean, it was almost the same thing exactly. And I've always been shocked that it didn't have more knowledge about it out there in the public domain.
Yeah, it's interesting. There isn't a write-up. I'm actually working on a write-up. That's why I got the documents from David. I don't have the full CUFO's report. I have most of it from David. But yeah, I'm going to write that up, because surprisingly, there isn't a write-up out there, and it's a great case.
I also hope that, I guess it was mentioned, but I mean, Lee's life, his stories you can make an encyclopedia out of what Lee touched in this field. And I hope that we can see that all come together in some kind of format somewhere, whether it's the coffee table book of Lee or something, but he certainly deserves it.
Speaking of which, I should add that Buck Wolf and David Moe, who's two co-workers, Buck Wolf was his editor at Huffington Post, and David Moe, they put together the effort to get Lee's ashes into space. Don't forget to check that out. We'll put the link up again so people can go donate to that. But I want to thank those guys for doing that. They are also working on an article about Lee, and I've been in touch with David Moy, and he's been sharing with me a bunch of stories about Lee's life that I was not aware of, and I think a lot of us of his friends were not aware of. And so keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for all of our social media, because I'm sure we're all going to share it. But they weren't ready to have it in time for us to do this. But really excited to see that. Next, let's talk to the next person that we've got. Our good buddy, Bryce Zabel. Welcome, Bryce. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here with you guys. Alejandro, the thing about this is so moving just for me is to hear everybody's stories. I saw you speak and I thought that was pitch perfect, and Whitley and Ben Hansen, James Fox. I mean, well, everybody. And it really has painted a really nice portrait of Lee. And it's really a kind of a nice night to do this.
Oh, go ahead. We can hear you. You're good.
Yeah.
We were just giving you the full stage.
I see. Okay. Listen, you know what I thought was interesting, though, is how many people have said, I don't really remember when I met Lee. And I have that same thing. I'm not 100% sure. And I thought, well, why is that? And I think for me, it's because, he was the kind of guy that you felt like you'd known forever. Right. So I always felt like, well, I've always known Lee. And then I thought, well, I can't have always known him. I mean, there must have been a moment. I will say this, and I thank you for this, because we got to hang out many times at the IUFOC, and that was always a great way to go. And I always enjoyed it so much. But if I really try to pin it down, I think I met Lee in the 1990s because that was when I had my NBC series Dark Skies on. And I know that two things. Lee had seen the pilot, and I believe he called me, or I don't remember how it went down, but we had Betty and Barney Hill in that Dark Skies pilot. And of course, Lee was very big on the Betty and Barney Hill case. And so we had one of those long conversations about it. And that was the other thing that I thought was funny, is that I always thought, and this, who knows, but I always thought, well, I guess Lee must really like me because we have these super long conversations. And now I realize that he liked all of us. So that's the great news. He just thought everybody was worth a long, good, strong conversation. And the other thing about Lee is that he was fascinated by the story behind the story of Dark Skies. He had me on his show a couple of times. Every time I talked to him in public, he made me tell that story about how the so-called men in black, or the real men in black, came to the Dark Skies offices and crashed my premiere party here at my house. And he always thought that was a really great story. And of course, we also had a mutual friend in Stanton Friedman, who he knew before I did, but I had optioned Stanton's book in the 90s. And I'm glad you just put this up, because one of the things at the Dark Skies party that got crashed by the guys that said they were from Office of Naval Intelligence is that we all had a little majestic badge made like this. And so the only guy that didn't have the majestic badge was this guy that crashed the party. So a few years back, and I think it was around the time of one of your IUFOCs, I made Lee a little badge that made him kind of an honorary member of Majestic 12. And I hope he enjoyed that. And then, the only other thing I'd say that I find kind of amusing, the only disagreement I ever had with Lee Speigel is when he sternly corrected me about how to spell his name. And given that I have a weird name myself, my first name nobody can spell, my last name nobody can spell, I felt equally shamed that I had spelled his name wrong. So for the record, people, it's E before I, Speigel, Lee Speigel. And that is burned into my brain, and I thank him for having done that. But, I remember, and then the only other really fun memory is I was in New York, and he and I went to Bobby Flay's restaurant for lunch with my family. And he was so great with my kids and my wife, and, they felt like they had known him forever. So I guess my tribute to Lee is he was a very accessible, wonderful guy, fascinating to talk about. I mean, as you guys have all pointed out, so many great stories and such a great storyteller. So it was my privilege and honor to really know Lee, as all of you have said. And we're all going to miss him. His work does endure, of course, and I hope I hope that's provides some faith for all of us at this point. But it was kind of shocking how it affected all of us so much when we realized he's really gone. And so I've enjoyed the opportunity to spend a few hours today and yesterday kind of rooting through my computer for my Lee Speigel archives. And I'm sure like everyone else, I have a deep amount of archives. I have the emails that we sent back and forth. I have the articles he sent me. And I even have a picture that we joked about on some emails where he sent me this picture that goes back to that UN meeting. And there's a picture of Lee and some other guy in the back. And he had sent this to me. And I wrote back to him, and it says, it looks like the two people in the back are having a lover's spat, because you got the information going on up front, and there's Lee in the back just head to head with this other guy. So it's very interesting. But listen, I just had a lot of great memories in the last couple of days thinking about Lee. I thought he had a great sense of humor. And like I said, he told a great story, and I'm a storyteller, so I really respected that. So that's kind of where I came down.
Well, thanks for sharing. And it's a lot of fun to sit back and reminisce on those moments that we all shared together that were so important to us. And I guess it's moments like these where we think about how precious those moments are.
For everybody and for all of us. If anything, I can't remember who said it today, but one of your guests said this UFO thing keeps pulling you back in, and it's true. I have waxed and waned over the years, and I just wonder. I can't remember if Lee ever waxed and waned. I think he got the bug and he stayed with it, whereas I tried to run from it a couple of times because I just thought this is going to destroy my credibility or destroy my career or something. And then I would just find myself back in the thick of it. So, and then the phone would ring and it would be Lee. And 3 hours later, I'd be saying goodnight. And I had the same thing that Ben Hansen said. My wife would go, "Who are you talking to?" And I'd cover up the phone and go, "Lee." And she'd go, "I'm going to bed." So great memory.
We all have those stories.
And so appreciative of all the people who have worked to bring this show together today. And it's well deserved and well earned, and we're all going to miss him.
Well, thank you so much for being part of the show. I know that's important to him, and we actually are starting to run out of time, so we have some videos to show. So I think the first one up is Peter Robbins.
Good morning from Raleigh, North Carolina, where I happen to be today for my nephew's wedding coming up later this week. I wanted to talk to you a bit about my memories of Lee Speigel, who was a friend of mine starting in the late 1980s, when I became a guest on his nationally syndicated NBC radio talk show, the youngest talk show host in NBC history. I loved the guy immediately. He had a great sense of humor. He was smart. He was very well informed. And we immediately realized that we had probably missed meeting each other just by a quirk of fate 10 years earlier. As many of your listeners know, Martin, Lee was instrumental in creating the 1978 United Nations hearings on UFOs. And I attended those hearings with my parents, who both took the day off from work. It was a terrible snowstorm the day before. And as Lee pointed out with humor over the years, we may have been sitting right next to his parents up in the gallery. After we reconnected, we saw each other as regularly as possible. He lived in Queens for many years, where I was born, Queens, New York, and worked on different projects together, spoke at the same conferences. His humanity, his abilities as a journalist to get to the core of the story and to help legitimize UFO news coverage and paranormal news coverage for the Huffington Post really was legendary. I don't know how many hundreds of stories he published, in the time that he was out there as an active journalist, but he really set the bar high for a lot of the rest of us. We worked together on the Travis Walton documentary, and when Travis was in New York some years ago, we spent several days together and visited Lee at the Huffington Post. I'm sorry I wasn't able to send you the photos I had hoped to before leaving on this trip, but it's a very funny sequence of him at work with Travis and me telling him to look more menacing. And it's a series of increasingly jokey, menacing looking photos. I think I was caught off guard as much as any of Lee's friends when I found out how sick he was and how quickly things came to an end, as they sometimes do. I think one of the best things that ever happened to him, certainly something that made him incredibly happy, was meeting and marrying Lorraine, who I haven't met, but who I have a very special feeling for. The last 10 years of his life, I think, were probably the happiest, and in great part because of her. I will miss him always, but like friends that we lose, who we don't want to lose, I will carry a part of him with me for the rest of my life. And I know in doing so, I will be the better person for it. I love you, Lee. I miss you. I always will. But thank you for all the memories and especially all the laughs.
It's Jennifer Stein. I just wanted to thank you for doing what you're doing to honor Lee Speigel. He was one of the most inspiring mentors for me in my life. Of course, we know him as being responsible for this incredible program he put together at the UN, way ahead of his time in 1975. But as a friend of Lee's, I know that he's someone who experienced this phenomenon firsthand when he was assigned to write a story about a UFO event that was going on, I believe, in North Carolina. And the newspaper he was writing for, which I don't think was the Huffington Post at this point, but it was early on, he was sent down to North Carolina to interact with some police who were having an encounter on a regular basis. And he experienced this same encounter that the police were having, where this UFO craft was showing up regularly. And he went out at night with a group of about 6 or 7 people. They saw this phenomenon. And I think it was Lee or one of the police officers who had a flashlight, and they were like blinking back at this UFO, which was blinking them. And the UFO came closer to them, hovered down low, took a beam of light, shot it down on the ground, and then moved that beam of light right up to their toes. And they all stood there shocked that there was this like acknowledgement and communication going on. And after that, Lee was really forever changed. And he was ahead of his time because he wrote about the subject in the Huffington Post numerous times with a serious reflection and a serious sophistication about the subject, which a lot of UFO writers were not able to do. And of course, one of the topics he'd written about was the very famous Travis Walton case. And I was lucky enough to have him as a speaker for one of the MUFON symposiums that I was helping to coordinate and run as a chairperson in Philadelphia in 2014. And he was willing to sit for an interview for the documentary we were in the process of trying to produce about the Travis Walton story, which we, of course, successfully did, called Travis, the True Story of Travis Walton. And Lee really set the bar for a number of the other interviews that we did that week at the Cherry Hill Hotel right near Philadelphia in 2014. And I also had the opportunity of speaking as a fellow speaker on a number of panels. I know once in Chicago for Paula Harris, we both spoke together. And that was just an incredible thrill. So Lee was a mentor to many people. And he was, he set the bar high for himself. And by doing that, in association with Lee, you had to come up to his level. And, I can remember some emails I got from him, which he said, "Jennifer, you spelled my name wrong." And I was like, oh my goodness. I realized how serious that was. But of course, Lee didn't realize I'm dyslexic. I even spell my own name wrong sometimes. But I was grateful to have Lee as a friend, and I got to spend time with him at some film openings and screenings with Paul Davids and his wife Hollis in New York occasionally, with Peter Robbins and a group of friends. So it was always a thrill to be with Lee. And he also participated when the Travis film was accepted and screened and won at the Philip K. Dick Film Festival in New York City. And that was a great thrill for me as well. So to Lee, if you can see us, if you can hear us, heads off, hats off. We admire you, respect you, love you, and we are forever grateful for your impact on our lives. Thanks for doing this.
All right. Thank you to Jennifer Stein for joining us. All right. So we're about ready to wrap up, and probably the hardest introduction of the night is the love of Lee's life, Lorraine. Thank you for joining us, Lorraine.
Thank you, Alejandro. I know Lee is loving this. He had such a great sense of humor. He could always make me laugh, and I know he did the same for all of you. This is so touching. Thank you. Thank you for the memories. Thank you for the stories that you all shared. I have so many thank yous to all of you. And all those long phone calls that you received from him. I was encouraging him to stay on the line so I could get some rest. And so, Margie, Lee so enjoyed working for you and with you on the Onyx Network magazine. Every Thursday night, he made sure he delivered the best, most interesting, most professional and informative show to his audience. He worked so hard and yet made it seem so effortless. He was so talented. And he always said that he had the greatest respect for his readers and listeners. And he so appreciated their loyalty over the many, many decades of his career. And Race, Lee's favorite producer and brother from another mother, you made it possible for him to bring the edge of reality back to radio. And we were both incredibly grateful for that inspiration and support. And thank you so much for this final show. I'm sure Lee would stamp it approved. And from a perfectionist, that's not an easy stamp to get. Jacques, you were so special to Lee. He was so proud to call you his friend and to have you as a sounding board in his life. We just love you, Jacques. And also a big thank you to James and Mark and David and Kathy and Peter and Whitley and the rest of his friends and colleagues that I've met over the years. Lee loved bringing people together, and he super loved hanging out with all of you in those backstage special rooms where you shared your stories and talked until the sun came up. Thank you for the stories you shared with me again tonight. especially the bathroom story. James, I never heard the end of that problem, and the barking of those two dogs, I think, haunted him. Dale, thank you so much for your beautiful painting. It's here with me now. Lastly, I do want to thank Buck Wolf, who made it possible to spearhead the idea of sending Lee's ashes to space, where I do believe he belongs, and for setting that GoFundMe page that will not only take care of Lee's ticket on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket that will be launched from Cape Canaveral on February the 1st, 2024, but it will also help preserve Lee's research materials and files at the National UFO Historical Research Center in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, so young researchers can access them for generations to come. And David, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to connect with you when I was in New Mexico recently. I know Lee's untimely passing is a great loss to this community, and I know the work will continue because he helped lay such a solid foundation for it. And yes, it's a great loss to me. We met in 1982, and it was love at first sight for us. I know his brothers, Larry and Jim, and their families will miss him. My sister Joanne and her family, especially the grandnieces and grandnephews who knew him only as Uncle Lee. They will miss him as well as all his friends and our Moonfire community. So on behalf of us all, we appreciate your condolences and this amazing, loving celebration of his life. When he told you he loved you, whether it was in a bro way or not, he meant it. We'll have a memorial life celebration for my husband around the time of his launch, and you will all be invited to watch that launch with me. All that's left to say is there will be no more photos of supermoons, but he will always be in our hearts. Honey, good night, my love. See you on the other side. This is your muse, over and out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for
I mean,
no
Lee loved.
one knew Lee better than you. No one, and he was never happier than when he was with you. He truly admitted to me that you owned his heart from the moment he first saw you. And I love you with all of mine. And as long as I have a breath left in me, you own it too. You were a dear stallion of a soul, a fire that I respect and that I love. And I pray that we get to spend more time together in the future. And Alejandro, if it's okay with you, I just want to say, because we're at time, I want to say my closing thoughts. And then we're going to play a video that Martin and Alejandro made with some music from Lee and his folk group. And then that will be followed by Lee himself closing this show for the final time. And
I just want to thank everybody real quick for joining us. Thank you for Martin for doing so much of this organization.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Lorraine, for just being such a wonderful person. And Lee's love for you was very sweet, and he loved to share with all of us how much he loved you. And it was inspiring for all of us, especially those of us who have our own loves that we love so much. It's just very loving. That's what Lee was. Lee was love.
Thank you, Alejandro. To everyone here tonight, I had such wonderful thoughts and memories that you've all shared with us, and it's been truly an amazing experience. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, I promised Lee I wouldn't do this. But for me, I simply want to say, Lee was a great friend, and he was also a mentor. He was patient and kind and had such a great sense of humor. And I will miss his counsel and his guidance most of all. He was both like a brother and a father figure to me. And I will forever be thankful for the privilege of knowing him. And if I know Lee as well as I think I do, the moment he crossed over, he went straight to the center of the galaxy. And he's working his way back to us now with all of the answers. For myself and everyone who participated tonight, thank you all for watching and listening. And this is a video created by Martin and Alejandro and them. Thank you guys so much. With one of Lee's folk singing songs. A wonderful video he made that will be followed by Lee Speigel closing Edge of Reality.
It's so good to see you happy for this time we had together. If it ends, well, that's the way it's got to be. But if you never find the right one that you want to love forever, you know you'll always be that one for me. So live your life and have a good time. Hope you'll always walk in sunshine. And may the road you're on grow easier by the mile. Let your spirit run free. And if you ever think of me, may the memory bring you back a smile. May the memory bring you back a smile. No one knows about tomorrow. Some seek joy and some find sorrow. But there's reason to be living every day. If you find yourself alone, don't be afraid to say you're lonely. You know I never would turn you away. So live your life and have a good time. Hope you'll always walk in sunshine. And may the road you're on grow easier by the mile. Let your spirit run free. And if you ever think of me, may the memory bring you back a smile. May the memory bring you back a smile. Say you're lonely. You know I never would.
I want to thank, as always, my inspiration, my muse, my wife, Lorraine, who is always my major inspiration. Thanks also, Mr. Race Hobbs, pushing and pulling all those technical knobs and dials and buttons that keep me on the air. Have a great night, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Lee Speigel, and you've been listening to Edge of Reality Radio on onxnetwork.com. Stay safe, healthy, and positive. And let's remember to keep our minds open out there.
Martin, I have transferred over the audio